everyone, and welcome to this new video. You would like to learn C# language and you are a beginner in programming. You would also like to become a developer. Well, you've come to the right place. Together, we are going to look at all aspects of programming from beginner to advanced level. You can create projects that you can highlight in your interviews, websites, web apps, mobile apps, and so on. Are you ready to start? See you in the next video. Let's go! Hello everyone, welcome to the C# course. First, we are going to look at what C# is. Before getting into the technical side, let's start first with a short history. Launched in 2000, C# language was created by Anders Hejlsberg and Microsoft. C# is a simple, modern, flexible, object-oriented, safe and open-source programming language. Over the years, Microsoft invested mostly in its own development. Based on C and C++ language, but designed to be easier to use, it has a wide collection of libraries to complete different tasks. At its inception, C# was a language exclusively for Windows developers since the .NET working environment was associated with the Microsoft operating system. This was probably a barrier for many to head towards C# because of its specificity to Windows. Nonetheless, the new .NET Core framework has been designed to run on several operating systems, including Linux and Mac, in order to allow a wider community of users. It became very popular. Indeed, C# is one of the most used languages worldwide, so there are multiple resources that you can find to help you learn the C# language. It is also used by large companies like Domino's Pizza, NBC, and so on. What makes this language special is that we can read and learn it easily, and it also allows the progress of many apps that can be developed with .NET and Visual Studio, such as native Windows apps, mobile apps, websites, as well as native Android or iOS apps with some additional frameworks like Xamarin. Before ending it, I would like to add that C# language is likewise used in the video games industry since most video games were developed with this language. Moreover, you might be familiar with the Unity engine where many games were scripted with C#, including games like Remote and many others. Unity is easy to learn as well with a large community with YouTube tutorials or even forums dedicated to this game engine. For beginners, game development is an excellent way to gain hands-on experience with C#. In short, C# is one of the most adaptable and modern programming languages in the world. It is easy learning and very flexible, and also has a great support from the community and Microsoft, which is very significant. Moreover, it can be used to write any kind of software, including console apps, mobile apps, Windows apps, websites, blockchains, and artificial intelligence. That's all for this video. In the next video, we are going to install together all the necessary software to start writing our code. See you soon! Hello everyone! In this video, we will install what's necessary to start programming in C#. During our training, we will be using the Windows operating system. Thus, we will install two software programs. First of all, we will go to Google and install the Visual Studio Community software. Community is the free and full version of Visual Studio. This software will allow us to write our code entirely and run our programs. Then, we will install the .NET 5 framework, which will allow us to develop on the latest framework created by Microsoft. So, I'm going to click on the first link. To continue, you need to click on Download Visual Studio. As you can see below, the download has started. Click on the download and press on Run, and finally press on Continue. Before installing Visual Studio, we will check the different options necessary for the development. With Visual Studio, we can develop in C#, but also in C++ or in Python. We can develop games, mobile applications, etc. We will check only the options that we need. So check the first one, web development and ASP.NET, which will allow us to do web development. Then go down and click on .NET Desktop. You can check on mobile development.NET as well. It's a framework that will allow us to create cross-platform mobile applications for iOS and Android. Finally, go down further and check on data storage and processing, which will help us to manage databases. Please note that you should be careful not to disconnect from the internet, because the download is very long due to the size of the options, as you can see here. Now you just have to click on install, and I'll see you soon. Once Visual Studio is installed, go back to Google and type .NET 5, click on the download .NET 5 link. We will choose the SDK, which is the software development kit that will allow us to build our applications. Then, choose your operating system. Mine is Windows X 64-bit. If you don't know if it's 32 or 64, you can click on the x86 or else go to the search bar below, type system and check if your operating system is the Windows 32 or 64-bit. To continue, go back to the download page, choose your operating system and click on the download link. The download has started. Once finished, click on it and click on Run and eventually install. That's it. We installed everything we needed to start practicing. That's all for this video. Now, let's move on. Hello everyone and welcome to this new video. We are going to create our first program and start coding together. You will start by launching Visual Studio. First of all, click on Windows, then type Visual, and you will find Visual Studio. From now, click on Create a Project. As you can see, there are multiple programming languages. Visual Studio is not limited to C#. Indeed, you can choose C++, JavaScript, Python, and so on. Thus, you will select C# language, and you can see on this list that we can do many things with C# language. For instance, you can create web applications, backend, frontend, mobile applications, games, etc. But here, we are interested in learning programming as well as practicing with C# language. So, we are going to start with a simple application with no graphical interface. It will allow us to actually learn how to program code in the easiest way. Those are console applications. So you will select console application. If you can find it, you can click on the search bar right here and type console. Therefore, you will see console application where you can choose .NET Core or else .NET Framework console application. In this case, I would advise you to choose the .NET Core application. As you can see here, there are different platforms. The .NET Core framework is a cross-platform framework, which means that your platform is fine. You can run it on several platforms such as Windows, Linux, iOS, when, as seen in the previous video, the .NET Framework application is restricted. So you will pick the .NET Core console application, then next. I'm going to name my project Project CS, and here I'm going to put it on my desktop, but you can choose where you want to put it. I'm going to create a project named Project CS to place my first project in. You can keep the same name as your project for the item solutions name. The difference between solution and project here is that the solution is like you have a global folder where you can later add other projects. In this part, we won't do it, but later on you will see that it can be useful. For example, if you wish to do a mobile application project, Well, you need to create a solution where you can find the Android application project as well as the iOS application project, etc. So basically, it is a box that contains several projects about the same subject. That's the only difference between the project and the solution. Here, you don't need to check this box, but click on Next. You don't need to change and can leave the .NET Core 5.0. Now you can click on Create. In the meantime, Visual Studio is creating your project. Let's continue now with the second part of our My First Program video. You can see that there are many things on the interface that appear on the screen, but no worries. I'll explain everything in detail. On the right, we have a list of files and a program CS file. CS means C#. When we create a new project, it automatically creates a CS file and adds a default code that I'll explain later on. You can see that we have a solution, and as I said earlier, the difference between the solution and the project is that the solution is a sort of box with several projects inside. Here, there is a solution called Project CS, and inside, there is a project also called Project CS. You can right-click on the solution and add a new project if you want to create a game on iOS and Android, for example. But now, this is not necessary since we will just be developing with this first project. Then, in this first program CS file, you can see that we have a dependency tab here, Frameworks and Microsoft.NET Core app, that shows what our programs depend on in order to function correctly. So we rely on this code library that will allow us to do some things, and in this case to call the console write line a function. Well, it is in this window that we will write our code, then click on the play button to run our program, and finally we will have an output window which will be displayed on the screen. You can see that if I click on the play button, Hello World is displayed. In our program, we have the line console write line. Console write line is what we call a function. It will allow us to display things on the screen that we passed as parameters. And here, we display the characters that we put in quotation marks. That's why, when the program is launched, the output window displays Hello World. However, you can see that I have additional things. Here, it indicates exit off, and there it shows all the way towards project.cx, which is the program that we just built by pressing on the button play. An executable told me that Hello World is the output of this program, which is the result of the program. Those extra lines are normal, so don't worry about it. You can now close the terminal. I'm going to explain in more detail how this code works. You may be wondering why we have all this. Here, the code that will interest us is this line right here. In fact, everything here is just to define what we call an entry point, a place where we can start running our code, and this is what we are interested in. In C#, you can see that we have braces that define a code block. It means that, for example, we will open a code block. Then, we will write some things inside and we will end up closing the code block with the last brace. Here, static main is generally the default entry point in programming languages. So you will always have this main function. Whether it's a programming language like JavaScript, C++, or Python, you will always find main as an entry point. However, this whole part is insignificant. Here, what is important is the code that we will type between these braces. That's where we will write our program by starting to modify it and playing with the console write line function. For example, you can see that if I take this line, copy and paste it, and then run the program again, this time hello world will be displayed twice. So these two lines will be displayed on my output window. Please note that in C#, what is important is the braces that will allow us to define our code block. Moreover, I can put what I want in these braces. Indeed, there is no need to respect the tabs as it is the case in different languages, like Python for example. Yet returning back to the lines works in C#. My program will run and we will have the same result. I can even put the two lines one after the other because this line is called a statement and in C# there is a semicolon at the end of a statement. Thus, the program is aware that this is a statement to execute and another one has to be executed as well. I'll also get the same thing if I restart the program. And you can see that I do have a line break between each statement in our output window since the line in the console write line function is a line break. So if I remove it and restart the program, you can see that the lines follow on from each other directly and there is no more line break. Just to clarify, the way you arrange your code that you call a function will not affect the result of the output window. What will impact it is either changing the function like we just did or giving different content to this function. For example, if I type hello on the first line and I put everyone on the second line, I'll put the line back so that we go back to the next row that I'm restarting and the program will display hello then everyone. You can see that this only works for readability reasons, so we need to structure the code line by line. And we also use tabs for the code to be easier to read. When you have to work in a company or do a group project, your code has to be easy to read for the other developers, otherwise it will be troublesome. But remember, it doesn't have any impact. However, if I now type a code that is not valid, what will happen? For example, let's say that I forgot to put a semicolon. Code is very accurate, so you will see that you have to be meticulous when writing it. To continue, you can see that if I forget to put a semicolon and then run the program, it won't work. I don't have an output window, I don't have a result, and I have an error. You can see an error that indicates to me semicolon expected. Don't panic when you have an error. You should always look at where the problem is coming from. Moreover, this block here is very important because it informs us on which line the error is located. Each time you have errors, this is where they will be displayed, and here we can see that the error is located on line 9 exactly. You can click on the error and it will automatically go to the line where the error is. So it shows me that there is a semicolon that's expected on line 9. It will be the same for all mistakes that you could make. For example, let's say I forgot to put a brace. Here I am making a mistake on purpose and it indicates that from line 7 there is a problem. That is what should alarm you when you see that you've forgotten a brace so that you can correct the error, then click on play and it will work again. You need to know that program errors are often due to small mistakes like this one. Even experienced developers can make this kind of mistake, so you need to get used to it and shouldn't forget semicolons, braces, and so on. That's it for this video. In this video, we have seen together how to create our first program and then execute it to obtain its result. Hello everyone and welcome to this new video. Today we will talk about programming. In the video, what is programming? Nowadays we often get the word about the notion of programming, but what is it actually? Well, programming is a series of instructions or tasks that we will give to our machine and this will allow us to get what we want. As we've seen in the previous video, we gave an instruction to the computer to display something in the output window. We clicked on the play button, then the code was executed and we got what we wanted to display. However, please note that a machine will only execute what is ordered to, but it will not have the ability to think for itself. Therefore, it is necessary to explain to it, down to the smallest detail, what it must do. For you to understand better, let's take a recipe for a chocolate cake as an example. First of all, we have to preheat the oven to 180 degrees, melt 2 bars of chocolate and 250 grams of butter. Then, we must mix together and add 3 eggs and whisk it all together. If the oven is set to 180 degrees, we can put it in the oven. Finally, the cake is ready. Well, all this is what we call an algorithm. Indeed, we perform all these tasks to obtain a final result. Basically, the recipe is the code that we're going to give to our machine, and then our machine is going to execute this code for us to get what we want. Here, the cake is what we expect. Our machine here is not a computer, but rather like a Thermomix, for example. We first injected some code into this machine and executed it in turn. On the one hand, if the code we injected into it is perfectly written, then the machine will execute what we asked it to do without any problem, and we will have our cake in the end. On the other hand, if our code contains errors, then the machine will not execute the code, or the result will be different from what we expected, like an undercooked cake, too sweet, etc. To sum up, this is what programming is. First of all, we have a step of conception of the algorithm. So we will define the instructions, the information, and the conditions to obtain what we want. Then, once the algorithm is designed, the developer will transcribe it into the desired language, the well-known code lines you may see very often. Finally, we have the compilation step. Here, we will translate what the developer has written in a machine language, also known as binary language. Indeed, a computer only understands the binary language odd and 1. Once translated, the computer will execute the program. Now, if we look into the recipe deeper, we can see that there is various information. For example, here we have numeric values called variables in programming. Here, if we'll check out if the oven temperature is 180 degrees, so we can put the preparation in it. In programming, it is called a condition. Well, we are not going to detail everything in this video. In the next videos, we will see the concepts of variable, condition, loop, function, collection, etc. Theoretically, but also with a lot of practice in order to know these notions that I have just mentioned very well. I will see you soon to start. Hello everyone, and welcome to this new video. In this video, we will approach the notion of variables and how to use them. Basically, a variable is like a box with a given name that will store data in memory. I will start with a simple example so that you can see that these variables are necessary to manipulate data in our program. What I'd like to do here is, instead of having things written in codes, I would like to put a variable in brackets that will store a sentence. For example, hello, today is Tuesday and I have to go to school. To do this, we just need to create a variable above this sentence. Then, I will name it intro sentence, for example. However, you can see that an error appears here. Indeed, it won't work because there are rules that must be respected in the C# language. You can't put spaces between words or special characters. You just need to type different words by putting capital letters or even underscores. Generally, developers work this way. Now, we will give a value to our variable. To do this, you will have to put an equal sign and then put in quotes, hello, today is Tuesday and I have to go to school. Don't forget the semicolon at the end. In C#, we always end a line with a semicolon, except in some cases that we will see later on. You can see that here we have an equal sign. It will allow us to assign a value to a variable and store it in memory. It's not like math, where the equal sign allows us to do an equality test like 2 plus 3 is equal to 5. Here, it's like having a jar and putting a candy inside. This jar will not be equal to a candy. It will still be equal to the jar, but this time it will contain a candy. So, it's the same for the variables. The equal sign will allow us to give a value to a variable, and here the value of the variable is intro sentence. It's the character string, hello, today is Tuesday and I have to go to school, that we can also reuse or modify later in our program. But here you can see that there is an error. I am missing something. Indeed, a variable will contain such data types. You can see that we have a string here. In C#, it is very important to specify the data type that our variable will contain. And to do this, we have to write the string in front of variables' names. In C#, a variable is composed of data type it will contain, then its name, an equal sign, and the value you want to assign to it. To sum up, here we have created a variable by specifying its type, so it's string type. Then we have named it intro sentence. Finally, we have simply assigned a value to it. Hello, today is Tuesday and I have to go to school. Brief aside, remember that the string corresponds to a character string. Indeed, the variable type will change when you store a number. It will no longer be a string but an int type. For a number with a decimal point, it will be a float type, etc. I'll talk about all this later on. Now you can see that it's underlined. However, this is just a warning. Basically, we have a variable that we don't use in our program, but now we're going to use it. To do this, we're going to delete everything and just display what's in the variable. Type console.writeLine in brackets and enter intro sentence, the variable's name we have just created, and don't forget the semicolon. Now we can launch the program. As you can see, we have displayed, hello, today is Tuesday and I have to go to school. So we gave the intro sentence variable to our console.writeLine function and we display the values this variable contains. Now we're going to have fun and modify our program. We will delete our intro sentence variable and create a name variable in string type and an age variable in string type as well that will contain someone's name as well as their age. Then we will try to display, hello, my name is Jibril and I am 18 years old in the output window. Jibril will be contained in the name variable and 18 is the age variable. Here I could have put an int type directly in the age variable because it is a number. In C#, depending on the version, it converts an int into a string because in some languages it is not possible to concatenate an int with a string. Here I have not done it because we do not have other existing types yet, so that will be the subject of the next video. So we are going to concatenate, which is basically appending several strings together. To do this, you need to type hello, my name is in brackets, then put a white space and a plus sign after the quotation marks and the name variable, then a plus sign quotation marks and type and I am, put a plus sign after the quotation marks and the age variable. And to finish, put a plus sign, then years, and do not forget the semicolon at the end. Please note that the plus sign must always be outside the quotation marks. Otherwise, we will get a different result from what we are expecting. I will now launch the program. And you can see that here I type, hello, my name is Jibril and I'm 18 years old. The program worked well, so you may wonder what happened. Actually, we appended several strings with variables that contain strings that we retrieved to get this result on the screen. You may also wonder what's the point of doing all that, and that we could have also typed everything in the codes directly. Our purpose here is to create reusable programs. Here we have written the person's name, but later we will see together how to make the computer ask the user to enter the name when we launch the program. So it will store this value in the variable and we will be able to use it as we did here. In the next video, we will see the different types of variable in C#. Hello everyone and welcome to this new video. First of all, in this video we will talk about the different types in C# and we will end up approaching the notion of constant. To begin with, there are different types of data in C#. We will first talk about the primitive types. So what are the primitive types? They are data types added to the C# language at the lowest level. Here is the list of the most commonly used primitive types in C#. Basically, the list is a little longer, but I decided not to include the rest of the data types because they are hardly used. So it's better to focus on the most used data types to understand better. If you're interested in learning more about the other primitive types, you can always turn to the Microsoft Online documentation. As you can see, this table is composed of 4 categories: integers, real numbers, character, and finally Boolean. The first column represents the data types in C#. Each word is related to a type in the .NET structure. And when you compile your application, the compiler internally translates your code and will look for the same as your C# type, which is in your .NET code. For example, the int in your program will be an int 32 in .NET. Then, the third column will show how many bytes your type uses in memory. I have arranged this table so that it is in ascending order. In the category of integers, the byte.NET type takes up the least amount of bytes, and the long.NET type takes up the largest. But you don't need to remember that. The important thing to remember is the last column. For example, a byte can contain a value between 0 and 255. A short is between minus 32,000 and 32,000. An int is between minus 2 billion and 2 billion, and a long is a very high value. We will often use the int type. In the category of real numbers, we have 3 data types: float, double, and decimal. The float is commonly used especially when you need a larger number or greater precision, and then you can use the others. Then we have the char type, which corresponds to the character. The char in C# corresponds to all the Unicode characters. And finally, we have a bool, which represents a Boolean that can be true or false. All the types in this table are very simple. However, real numbers are particular in C#. Let me explain. As you can see in the category of real numbers, we have the float, the double, and the decimal. Here the double is highlighted because it is the default one used by the compiler in C# when you use real numbers. So if you would like to declare a float, then don't forget to specify to the compiler that it is a float. To do this, in addition to having given the type to the variable, you must put a suffix at the end of your number. Indeed, you have to add an F just after the last digit of your number. As you can see below, if I hadn't put the F after it, an error would be displayed because the compiler doesn't know if it should consider it as a float or a double, since the default compiler defines a real number as a double, and it's not possible to put a double in a float type. So it's very important not to forget that. Moreover, it's the same for the decimal, except that here the suffix will not be an F but an M. So there you have it. We are done with primitive types. Please note that in C# some types are not primitive among them. Indeed, there are strings, as we've seen in the previous video, but also arrays, enum, class that correspond to strings, tables, structures, classes. We will see all these notions step by step during our course. Now let's go to the second part of our video, which will deal with the notion of constant. Let's go. We've seen in the previous video the notion of variable. We can reuse this variable in our program, display the value it contains, modify it, etc. It's the same process with the constant, except that the constant can be modified. Indeed, the value that is contained in the constant can be reused but can never be modified. You may wonder, what's the point exactly? Let me give you an example. Let's imagine that we have created a fighting game. Each player has some VP. You probably know that the player has a maximum and minimum number of VPs. Basically, their maximum is 100 and their minimum is 0. These are values that will not change during our program. The maximum of VP will always be 100 and the minimum will always be 0. The only thing that will change during the fight is the VP of the player, not the minimum or maximum value. Do you understand? So that's what our constant will be used for, to block the end of a value so it won't change if we try to modify it in our program. So let's see now how does it work in C#. Let's go to our IDE. Now we are on IDE, we can delete all this. To create the constant, it's very simple. Type const, the data type that we're going to assign to it will be a number that we can put int and name the constant. Here it's a minimum value, so we can name it minLife. Then an equal sign and the value that we want to assign to it, which here is 0. And don't forget the semicolon. Then we will do the same for the maximum life. Go down below and type const, then the data type int, its name life max. Add an equal sign to the max value, which is 100, and don't forget the semicolon as well. Finally, we can create a live variable which will correspond to the life of the player in the game. To do this, type int life is equal to 50 for example, and don't forget the semicolon. We are going to carry out some tests to show that we cannot modify the value of a constant. To do this, go to the line below and type lifemax is equal to lifemax minus 1. So what are we going to do? We are going to assign to lifemax the value contained in lifemax minus 1. Which means 100 minus 1. However, you can see that to modify the value contained in lifemax, it must be a variable. And we can't modify the value of a constant, so that's what the constant is used for. We can't modify values that must be in the same during our program. Now, if I want to modify the player's life, I can do it because it's a variable, and this value can undergo changes if the player undergoes damage. Here I will first display the life before the modification. I will type console.writeLine. And put the life variable in brackets without forgetting the semicolon. Then below I will type life is equal to life minus 10 for example. And I will display it again. Then below I will type CW and put a tab on my keyboard. It is a small shortcut on console.writeLine. Put the live variable in brackets and don't forget the semicolon. Now I will run the program. You can see that at the beginning the player's life is at 50. Then the player will suffer a damage of 10 PV. Our life now is 40 PV. So remember that a constant is like a variable, except that the constant is limited. Indeed, its value does not change during the program. The constant will be used when we have values in our program that do not change, like in a video game, or if we create a payment system for a site and we know that the VAT will never change. It will always be 20%. So here in this case, we will also use a constant. There are a lot of cases like this one, so I'm not going to mention all of them. I hope that my explanation were clear and you enjoyed this video. See you soon in a new video. Hello everyone and welcome to this new video. In this video, I'm going to give you an exercise to do in order to put into practice the theory that we've seen before. This exercise is as follows. I would like you to show me in the console represents information that will be stored in variables. This is the result I'm expecting from you. You absolutely need to respect this structure. You can put what you want in the data. However, I would like you to use the different types that we've seen in the previous video. For your name and last name, you know that this data does not change and that it is a string, so it is up to you to guess. Then, the person's age is a number that changes with time. Balance of their bank account is a number with a decimal point. It's up to you to guess what type of number you're going to use. If you need any help, I would advise you to review the previous video. In any case, it's up to you. Pause the video and we'll be right back for the correction. On your marks, get set, code. We are now going to correct this exercise. I hope you succeeded. If not, pay attention to the correction. Here we go. So, in the first step, you have to display a person's name and last name. I will close the Apple window. And we know that the name and last name are data that will not change in our program. So, when we say data doesn't change, we automatically think of constants. But also, since they are strings, it will be a string type. So we will create a constant name by typing constant in the string type that we will call name. Then we will put an equal sign and you can choose the value. As you can see, I will put ubelayed in quotation marks. And don't forget the semicolon. Then I will go to the next row and create a new constant for the first name. So I will type const in string type. Then I will name it first name equal sign and tutorial in quotation marks. And don't forget the semicolon. Here we will not display them right away. I will create all my variables first and then we'll display them. So let's go to the next row. And as you can see here, you were supposed to display an age. So a number and the age changes with time. So here it won't be a constant but an int type variable. Since it's a number, I could have used a byte or short. It's quite possible because the age will always be between 0 and 255. Generally, we often use an int type for numbers not to have any problems in memory. If you have chosen the byte or the short, don't worry, it is also correct. To get back to our age variable, you will have to fill in its type. So type in the then variable's name, age for example, then an equal sign and the age you wanted to give it. I will choose 17. Don't forget the semicolon. Finally, the balance of their account. Here we have a number with a decimal point, which indicates a number with a decimal point means a real number. So we have float, double, and decimal. Here you can choose one of the three, which is still correct. However, remember that the double and the decimal took more space in memory. 8 bytes for the double and 16 for the decimal. Therefore, here we don't need to use so much memory space for a simple balance. Can you see? As a developer, we have to make sure that we can create optimized programs as light as possible for the machine that doesn't consume much energy. Regarding speed questions, cost, and for the environment, a non-optimized program will cause speed problems, consume more energy, etc. So it is important for your future as a developer to take care of all these problems. So regarding our balance, you had to create a float type variable that you could name balance. Then put an equal sign and a point number, so I will choose 3045.5. Here do not put a comma, but a point, and don't forget the semicolon at the end. As you can see, a mistake appears here. Remember that the real numbers in C# were particular, especially for the float and the decimal. Indeed, if you don't indicate to the compiler if it's a float or a decimal, it will treat it by default in double. However, you can't put a double in a float or a decimal type. So you just had to add an F just after the last digit of the number. If you had chosen the float type, it was an F and it was an M if you had chosen the decimal type. For the double, there was no need to add anything. Now that we have created all our variables, we are going to display them. To do this, go to the line and type the shortcut of console.writeLine, so CW and tab. Then type in the brackets your name, colon, then white space, and add a plus sign and the variable name. And don't forget the semicolon at the end. To continue, I will copy and paste this line several times to go faster. And now I just have to change the values. Here I will type first name. And here the first name variable. Then here age, and here the age variable. And finally here balance. Now I can start running the program, and you can see that we have the expected result. I hope that you have succeeded and this video has helped you. I'll see you next time in a new video. Hello everyone and welcome to this new video. In this video, we will see how to interact with the user. It means that the user will be able to enter data directly. In the previous videos, we initialized the variables with information in our code. Now the user will enter data directly and it will be stored in the variables. So here we go. I'm going to show you how to do it. Let's go to Visual Studio. We are now on our IDE. And we are going to create a program that will allow us to interact with the user. So first of all, we are going to ask the user a question. We type console.writeLine, so we are going to type CW tab. Then we will display the following question in the output window. So put in brackets, what is your first name? Here you can see that we have just displayed the question in the output window. Now we are going to ask the user to enter the name. There is a function that allows us to do this. It's called console.writeLine. This function will allow the user to enter something in the output window. And this function is called blocking, which means that as long as the user does not enter anything, the program will remain blocked. Moreover, this function only deals with strings. So everything you type will be considered as a string. Even if you type a number, it will be considered as a string and not as an int. If you want to transform it into an int to modify this value, you will have to convert it into an int, but no worries, we will talk about this conversion in the next video. For now, let's stick to our user interaction. Now let's run the program to see what it does. As you can see, we have our what's your first name question and we can now enter something with our keyboard. For example, we'll write the name Elias and we'll press on the button enter. So what do you see? Indeed, nothing happens. You may wonder why. So in our program, we simply use the function that allows us to interact with the user, but we won't tell it to go and store the value that the user is going to enter and display it to me. That's why when we entered something, nothing happened. So we can go back to our program and store the value that the user will enter in a variable to be able to reuse it and display it later on. We'll create a string variable because, as I previously said, the console.writeLine function only takes over strings. Then we will name it, for example, user, then underscore and name. We will add an equal sign and then we'll assign the value the user will enter. So we'll put the console.writeLine function here and don't forget the semicolon. And to finish, I'm going to display the value that the user has entered. So I will type console.writeLine and in brackets and quotes, I will put a small sentence like you are with colon, then outside the quotes, I will put a plus sign and put the variable user, then underscore and name. Therefore, I will launch the program. As a result, you have displayed what is your first name, then I'll choose a first name, Adam for example, and then you can see that it displays you are Adam. So the program has retrieved the value that the user entered, and then it concatenated it with the string you are and displayed it. Now let's go back to our program and I'm going to delay this. I will ask the user to enter what year is it. So I will type console.readline, I will type CW tab, then in brackets I will add quotes, and write the following question. What year is it? I will create a variable that will store the year that the user will enter. I will put a string I will name year, then an equal sign and the function console.readline. Before running the program, I would like to modify this value and add one more year to it to display the next year in the output window. We will be in 2022 if the user typed 2021. So here I'm going to take back the variable, then add an equal sign and type year, and then add +1. This is called incrementing in programming. Then in the next row I will type console.readline, and in brackets I will type next year will be in, I will put a plus sign after the quotation marks. And there I will put the year variable to which I added 1. Now I will start running the program. It is asking me the question, in what year are we? I will type 2021 and enter it, and you can see that the result we have is strange. Basically here 2021 is considered as a string and you can't add anything to a string. So here it has transformed the 1 into a string and concatenated with 2021. That's why we have this result in the output window. So how can we do this knowing that the console.readline only takes strings as input? Well, we'll have to convert the variable that we store the user's input. We will get the value of a string type to convert it into an int type. And this will be the subject of the next video. Indeed, in the next video we will learn how to convert a number that the user has entered in string form into an int. I hope my explanation were clear to you and that you enjoyed this video. Hello everyone and welcome to this new video. Today we will see together how to convert a string into an integer. First of all, I'm going to explain a few things you need to know. Indeed, we can talk about converting a variable with a string or an int, byte or float type, etc., but only if we have a number stored in the string type variable. So if our variable stores an integer in string type, we can convert it. However, if our variable has a number but also a letter, a word, etc., then it will be impossible to convert it because we can't convert letters into a number. I will give you an example. Here we will create a string type variable. Then we will name it test, for example, and then add an equal sign and the number 30 in quotation marks. And don't forget the semicolon. If we want to convert this value into an integer in int type, for example, it will work. Now, if I add hello next to the number 30, well, it won't work anymore because, as I said, you can't convert a string into an integer. It is important to remember that you have to put an integer in quotes to be able to convert it. Now we will see how to convert the number 30, currently in string type, into an int type. To do this, we first need to create a variable in int type. Since the value of our variable will change, we have to create a variable that is the same type to which we want to convert our value. And here we want to convert the value to int, so we will create a variable in int type. Then we will name it conversion, for example, then add the equal sign, and now it's here that we are going to make our conversion. We'll use a function to transform a string into an integer int. And this function will start with the type that you want. So here int. Then we will add a dot and parse. Then in brackets the variable you want to convert. Here is test. We will now try to display this value and we can see that it works. If I want to play with this value and add 1, for example, well, it's possible because it is now considered as a number. I'm going to test. After console.readline, I'm going to write conversion is equal to conversion plus 1 semicolon. Basically, I'm incrementing the value stored in conversion by 1. So I am adding actually. If everything goes as expected, the program should display 31 in the output window. And as you can see, 31 is displayed. In the previous video, we have seen that when we type +1 with what the user has entered, the program has directly transformed our 1 into a string because the function that allows it to interact with the user takes back everything in string type, whether it will type a number or not. The computer here will then execute the program. However, it will not directly convert a number already typed into another number. It is not aware of what the user is going to do with it, so it will convert the +1 and concatenate it with what the user has entered. It is also important to note that this is specific to the latest version of C#. Indeed, some languages will display that it is now possible to convert a +1 into a string, like Python for example. Now you know how to convert a string into an integer. I hope you enjoyed this video and my explanations were clear to you. Hello everyone and welcome to this new video. In the previous videos, we've seen how to interact with the user and convert a string into an integer. In this video, I'm going to give you an exercise to do in order to put into practice the theory we've seen together. Let's go! So in this exercise, you will have to create a calculator. Basically, as you can see here, you have to ask the user for a number and then you have to ask them for a second one. The program will add these two numbers and will have to display the result of this addition. It is quite simple. That's all you have to do for this exercise. You can watch the previous videos again if you need help. I hope my explanations are clear. Pause the video and we'll correct this exercise right after this. Here we go, let's correct this exercise. I hope you succeeded. If you haven't, follow carefully the equation with me. The purpose of this exercise was to ask the user to enter two numbers, add them, and then display the result of this addition. So first we had to type console.readline. Then type enter a number, colon, a white space in quotation marks, and don't forget the semicolon. Then we will interact with the user, so we had to create a string variable below that you can name number 1 for example. To continue, add an equal sign as well as the console.readline function which allows the user to enter something in the output window. Don't forget the semicolons. Then I'm going to do the same thing for the second number. I will type console.readline, then type enter a second number, colon, white space in quotes. Don't forget the semicolon. I will create the second string variable below that I will name number 2. I will then add an equal sign and the console.readline function with a semicolon. To sum up, I typed console.readline for the user to enter a number. Then I created the string variable that will store what the user will enter with the console.readline function, as I explained in the previous videos. The console.readline function only deals with the strings, so here I had to create a string variable. And then I repeated the same process for the second number. Now that we have stored the numbers the user will enter, we need to use them. To do this, we'll create an int type variable named addition. Then we will put an equal sign, and in this variable we will store the result of the addition of the two numbers that the user has entered. However, there is a small problem. If we add the two string variables, we have seen previously that when we add two strings, they will concatenate, so they will basically stick together. For example, if the user types numbers like 15 and 10, the result will be 1510. And it won't work because we can store a string in an int type variable. So to fix this, we'll use the conversion seen in the previous video. To do this, we will write int.parse and put the number 1 variable in brackets, and then a plus sign to be able to make an addition. Finally, we will write int.parse and put the variable number 2 in brackets. So here I've created an addition in an int type variable, and now I will assign something to it. And what is something? Here I'm actually getting the value of number 1 and number 2. These values are basically strings, so they are considered as strings and not integers. And with the function int.parse, I will convert them into an integer, which will now allow me to add them and store this addition in the variable addition. And finally, we need to display the result of this addition. So we'll type console.writeLine and put number 1, white space, a plus sign and white space, in brackets and plus sign outside the quotes. Then put the variable number 2, so a plus sign, then quotes, an equal sign, and a plus sign outside the quotes. A plus sign, then type addition, and at the end don't forget the semicolon. I will start running the program. Enter a number is displayed, so I will type for example 15, then press on the button enter. Then the second number, I will type 10 and press on enter. As you can see, we have the result of our addition. So 15 plus 10 is equal to 25, so we managed asking the user for two numbers, to add them and then to display them. That's all for this exercise. I hope you succeeded and everything was clear for you. Hello everyone and welcome to this new video. Today we will talk about the notion of operators. In Csharp there are different types of operators. The arithmetic operators, the comparison operators, the assignment operators, the logical operators, and the binary operators. We'll talk about it later on because it is an advanced notion. First of all, we will talk about arithmetic operators. Arithmetic operators are used in mathematics. We have the plus sign to add that we have seen in previous videos, the minus sign to subtract, the multiplication, the division, and finally here a modulo, an operator that is probably new to you. It will allow you to recover the remainder of a division quite simply. Then we have in the category of arithmetic operators increment plus plus and decrement minus minus operators. That will allow you to increase and decrease the value of a variable by 1. It's basically a shortcut to a is equal to a plus 1 or a is equal to a minus 1, as you can see in the example right here. Now let's move on the comparison operators. The double equals will allow us to carry out an equality test between two variables. In a previous video, we've seen that a simple equal sign allowed us to assign a value to a variable. In C#, in order to find this notion of equality, we need to put two equals. In this example, we are comparing if the variable a is equal to the variable b. Then below, the exclamation mark equal is the opposite. This operator will allow us to carry out an equality test. As you can see in this example, we are testing if a is different from b. Then we have the decrement operator that will compare if a is strictly greater than b. Here, if a is greater than or equal to b, since we have an equal sign in addition to the decreasing sign, we will lose the condition of strictly greater and give another possibility to our program to compare if it is greater or equal. Then we have the opposite, the increment operator that will compare if a is strictly smaller than b, and finally it's the same as here, but here the incrementing operator will check if a is smaller than or equal to b. Let's move on to the assignment operator. As you already know, the equal sign allows us to assign a value to a variable. Then for the rest of the table, these are all shortcuts to what you can see in this column. When you write this way in your program, it's the same as writing this way. And finally, the logical operators. These operators will often be used when we insert conditions into our program. Let's take a recipe to illustrate this notion. The double ampersand translated as AND will allow us to add a condition in addition to our first basic condition. Let's imagine our condition is the following. If the preparation is ready, then put it in the oven. Thanks to the ampersand, we can add another condition in addition to the one we have given here that will indicate if the preparation is ready and if the oven is at 180 degrees, then put it in the oven. Moreover, these two conditions must be fulfilled for our instructions to be executed. We will discuss these things in detail when we come to the notions of conditions. To continue, the where operator is represented by two pipes, which will allow us to have at least one of the conditions fulfilled in order to be able to execute the instruction. So if the preparation is ready or if the oven is at 180 degrees, we can put it in the oven. It is no longer necessary to have the two conditions fulfilled to be able to execute the instruction. Only one will be enough. And finally, we have the not operator, represented by an exclamation mark, which allows us to have the opposite of a condition. Let's take our condition that if the oven is at 180 degrees, and then put an exclamation mark before the sentence. Then we'll get the opposite of our basic condition, which will indicate here if the oven is now at 180 degrees, then put it in the oven. That is all for the operators. We will see in detail these operators as we go along in our course. We'll practice on them. I hope that Hello everyone and welcome to this new video. Today we will talk about the notion of comment in C#. First of all, what is a comment in programming? A comment is an indication we will add in our code in order to have a clearer code for you, but also for other developers working with you on projects in the company, etc. Therefore, comments will help having a better understanding of your code. These comments will be totally ignored when you run the program. The C# compiler will not take them into account. It's like they are non-existent. Just in case you're wondering, comments will not affect your code. Many developers neglect comments when actually they are very useful. For example, if you're on vacation or on leave, etc., and you haven't looked at your project for a while or you're working in a group project with other developers, you might have trouble understanding and knowing what other developers do. So a comment like, "Here I created a function to add a project to cart," will allow you to understand more easily the developer's logic toward this program. Let's go now to Visual Studio to see how to make comments in C#. I am now on Visual Studio to show you how to make comments in C#. To do so, it's easy. Go on a line and add a double slash. You will have a single line comment. As you can see, the comments are colored. In most programming languages, comments are green. Moreover, your comment should be clear and precise to be easier to understand when you read your code again, but also because you may be working in a group project, so it is important to write exact and useful comments for other developers. For example, here I will write what the console.writeLine function does in my program. So I will write, the user is asked to enter a number. I can also write here, converting string type numbers into int type, and then I will add them up. These indications are necessary to help us to have a better understanding of our code. As you can see, creating comments is easy. However, there is another way to make comments in C#. Indeed, we will be able to write multi-line comments. So to do so, type /**. You can now write a multi-line comment. Type */ to be able to write what you want. It can be very helpful, especially if you want to put a part of your code in comment to carry out some tests for the compiler to ignore it. or if you need to explain a part of your code in a multi-line comment. That's all for today. I hope Hello everyone and welcome to this new video. In this video, we'll summarize what we've seen throughout the first part of our course. Before continuing on the next section, I would suggest you to practice the notions we've seen together in order to strengthen your knowledge by practicing more. If there are some points you haven't understood, don't hesitate to watch the previous video to make sure to understand. First of all, together we installed necessary tools to start writing your first line of code. Then we practiced. Next, we've seen what programming is all about. To continue, we discussed several notions, like the notion of variables, which is very important since it's one of the bases of programming. Moreover, we also approached the notions of types and constants, user interaction, conversion, and operators while practicing by doing some exercises. I hope you enjoyed this first section. Now we will approach some advanced notions, still easy for now. Throughout this section, we will see the notions of class, string, array, and enumeration. These are called non-primitive types. We'll talk about this in detail in the following videos. I hope you are ready for the next part. Hello everyone and welcome to this new video. In this video, we will discuss the concept of objects. The C# language is a programming language from the languages called object-oriented programming. They are also called OOP, which means object-oriented programming. It is important to know that in C#, everything we use is an object. And in this video, we will focus on creating our own object. To create an object in C#, we first need to define what it will look like, so we'll use classes. The principle is quite simple. We'll define them once with different parameters, and we'll be able to call them several times with parameters with different values. Classes will allow us to define what our object should look like. Once we have created this mold, we can create as many objects as we want with different attributes. Let's take an example to be more specific. Let's imagine that you are the owner of a garage. In this case, you will manage cars, and those cars have a set of common features. However, they can have different values. All the cars have a color, but this color can be different for each car. Moreover, all the cars have doors, but the number of doors can vary, like 3, 5, and so on, depending on the car. When you create a class for your car, you will define attributes. For a car, we will define a brand attribute, a year attribute, and a color attribute, for example. From this class, we can create different objects called instances. Each instance will have the same attributes. Nonetheless, the values of the instance attributes will be different. For example, here we have a blue Peugeot car from 2019, and here a gray Mercedes car from 2021, etc. Furthermore, we can create functions in our objects that will allow us to act on our instances. A function that belongs to a class is called methods. Regarding your car, you can create methods such as start, move forward, or backward. If you still don't understand what object-oriented programming is for, except creating cars and so on, well, object-oriented programming would first help us to better organize our code and avoid repeating lines of code. As I mentioned in a previous video, our purpose as developers is to create programs that can be reused. Object-oriented programming will allow us to achieve this goal. So instead of writing 50 times a block of identical code to create a multitude of cars, especially if you are an owner of a garage, for example, we will be able to create a single class that will allow us to create a car with a multitude of different attributes later in a single line of code. So that's all for object programming and classes. Now let's go to Visual Studio and learn how to create a class in C#. We are now using Visual Studio to create a class. You'll see that creating a class is pretty easy. Go to the top of the page and fill in the access modifier. Here you can determine if your class is accessible through your application or if you want to limit its access. Basically, you determine who can access this class. Here I will set it to public so it can be accessible through my application. For now, no worries. We'll discuss all the access modifiers in detail during this course. Remember that when you want to create a class, use the public keyword to make it accessible through your application. Once you have set the access modifier, you need to add class as a keyword. And then we will name our class. I will name it car and open the braces. As I mentioned in the previous video, our car can contain attributes or methods. For example, here we'll create attributes that will specify the car's brand, year, and color. Same as the classes, we need to specify an access modifier that will make our attributes accessible throughout our application or not. So here I will type public, then we will put a string since it's a brand type, and I will name my attribute brand. Note that in C#, when you have a declaration like an attribute declaration here, you have to end the statement with a semicolon. We will also create the year and color attributes, so go to the line and write public. There we will put an int type because it's a year. We will name it year and add a semicolon. And below, do the same for the public color. Put a string because it's a color, so we will name it color. And add a semicolon. Now that we are done with our attributes, I mentioned that a class can contain attributes but also methods. So here we will create a method that will display the details of our car. We will now write public then void, which means that our method doesn't return any value. We will name it displayCar, for example, and open the brackets. In brackets, we will display our car's characteristics, so we will type console.writeLine in parentheses, and we will write brand, white space, a colon, white space. Then outside the quotation marks, we will add a plus sign, and for the attribute, type brand. Add a plus sign and open the quotation marks, and write year, white space, colon, and white space. And outside the quotation marks, add a plus sign and type the year attribute and add a plus sign. Then we will write color, white space, colon, white space in quotation marks. Then the color attribute and add a plus sign. Then close the quotation marks and add a plus sign. And we will put the color attribute. Also note that this method doesn't take any parameters, as indicated by an empty parenthesis, so it will just display what we've put in the console.writeLine. Now that we have a class, let's see how to create an object. Creating an object is quite similar to creating a variable. First of all, we'll go into our main method in main. We'll start with the type. My object type will be the class name we've just created, which is car. Then we'll name it car. We'll also have to allocate memory for our object. To do this, add an equal sign. Also note that it is the new operator that will allow us to allocate memory for our object. So we will type new and repeat the class we have created. Then add parentheses and a semicolon at the end. Here we need to put the parentheses to create an instance, because if we don't, my object will be equal to the car class, so we won't get the instance we are expecting. Now that we have the car object, we can access its attributes or methods by using the dot notation. Here in our class, we haven't assigned any value to our attributes in order to be able to create a multitude of cars. The dot notation will allow us to assign values to our attributes. So we will tap Object and the attribute's name, which is brand. Here the dot means that the brand attribute belongs to the car class. Then we will assign a value, so we'll have to add an equal sign and the brand period, for example. Remember to always add a semicolon. To continue, we will do the same thing for the year and the color. So I will type car.year is equal to 2019 since it's an int type, and don't forget the semicolon. And regarding the color, I will type car.color is equal to blue. Put blue in quotation marks and add a semicolon. Now that I'm done with my attributes, I'll get the method that will allow us to display the car. So here I will go to the next row and type car.displayCar in parentheses and add a semicolon. I will now run the program. As you can see, our car is displayed. We've managed to display our object attributes. However, my car class is in the program.cs file, so it is binding. Now let's imagine that we create an application and we put all our classes in a single file. Your program will not be optimized, will be slow and overload your memory. So we will move our class into a dedicated file, so click on public just above where we have created the class and you can see that we have a blue icon here. Click on it, then click on move to car.cs and it will automatically create a file with our class inside and remove it from our main program. And if we run the program, we can see that it still works, because I told you that here we put our class in public, which means that it is accessible through our application, so we can use it in any way. Finally, it is possible to create a class in another way and faster. Indeed, you just have to go to the top and click on Project. Then click on Add a Class below, and you can name your class Motorcycle, for example. Click on Next, and you can see that Visual Studio has automatically created a new class. Anyway, that's all for the classes. I hope my explanations were clear. Hello everyone and welcome to this new video. In this video, we will discuss the notion of array in C#. First of all, what is an array in programming? Arrays are actually a data structure that will allow us to store several variables of the same type. For example, imagine that you want to work with 3 names. Now, if I ask you to do that, you will create 3 variables, whatever the name is, that are going to store 1, 2, and 3, right? And as developers, we have to optimize a program. So creating 3 variables won't optimize your program. That's why we will create a single array that will create our 3 variables. To do this in C#, you have to enter the variable type you want to enter in the array. So here int, then put the square brackets, a space, and name this int array numbers, for example. Finally, we will assign the 3 variables we want to create, so we will type new, and enter the int type again, then put the number of variables we want in our array. So here 3 in square brackets. To sum up, I created an int type array named numbers. Then I will assign it 3 variables by making a memory allocation in my array for 3 int variables. Here the array is not an object in quotation marks, because to create an object we have to use the new like in the previous video. In short, we have a class named array in the system. And when we add new, we will create an instance of this class and thus an object. That's why we will allocate memory here. Now that we have created our array, we can access these items using an index that we will put in the square brackets. In C# and generally in programming languages, the first element of an array doesn't start with an index, but with 0. For example, if we have 3 items in our array like here, we will have 0, 1, and 2, and not 1, 2, and 3, as we might think of as an index. Furthermore, we would like to give values to the items of our array. First, you need to name this array, here numbers, and put the index of the item in the square brackets. The one you want to assign the value, then put an equal sign and choose the value you want to give it. Moreover, if you already know the values you want to insert in your array, you can also add in braces the values you want and in order of the items. We'll go into more detail about what we can do with arrays in another section of our course. Now let's go to Visual Studio to put into practice what we have just seen together. Hello everyone and welcome to this new video. We are now on Visual Studio to put into practice the notions seen in the previous video. To create an array is very simple. Together we will see two ways and you can also consult the Microsoft documentation to see the others. So we will go to the next row, then show the data type we want to store in our array. Here I will store first names, so strings. I will start by giving the type, so type string, then I will put square brackets, a space, name it first name with an S for example, and add an equal sign. Then I will tab new, and as I mentioned in the previous video, new will allow us to allocate memory for our array, but also create an instance of the array class. To finish, I will write again the data type I want to store in my array, so string, and I will add square brackets within I will put the number of values I want to store. Here I will store 3 first names, so I will put 3 in the brackets. Now we have our array, but we haven't assigned any values to it yet, and as we have seen, there are two ways to assign values in our array in C#. The first is to put braces after the square brackets, and enter the values you want. Now I'm going to enter the 3 first names that I have stored in my array. So I will add quotation marks because it's a string type. I will choose Jibril as first name, for example. Then for another value, I will put a comma, then quotation marks, and Jason. Then I will add the comma again. I will also add the third name, the quotation marks, and type Ilyas. And I will finish with semicolons. This is the first way to assign values to an array. Note that each value which is in an array has an index. Here, if I choose the first name Jibril, its index will be 0. Indeed, the first value of an array is index 0. Then, if I choose Jason, it will be 1 and so on. Also note that thanks to the index, we can retrieve a value from an array to modify it, display it, etc. We will see how to do this later on. Now, let's move on to the second way of assigning values in an array. First of all, we will delete everything and only leave the semicolons. Then we will go to the next row and type your array's name as well as the square bracket and specify the index in square brackets as this is the first value of the array. Type 0 in the square brackets and same as variable, add an equal sign and enter your value, then add a semicolon. Here our first name, so Jibril in quotation marks, and do not forget the semicolon. Then we will do the same for the second name. We will not put index 2 but 1, and for the last one, not 3 but 2. Remember that the index of an array always starts with 0. Now let's imagine that we try to add a value in addition to what we have allocated. It means that we have allocated an array in memory that will contain 3 elements, but that we are going to add a 4th element. What will happen? Well, the program will indeed indicate to me that there is a problem. We have exceeded the length we gave in the brackets and the program will not be able to run since it contains an error. So, if we have added this value, then we will have to change the 3 in the brackets and put 4 instead. And finally, to display a value of an array, type console.writeLine, put the name of the array in brackets, put brackets again, and put the index of the value you want to display in the brackets. For example, if I want to display Jibril, I'll put 0 because it is located as index 0. If I run the program, we will have Jibril displayed in the Apple window. As you can see, it's very easy. Now I'm going to give you a little exercise to do. The purpose of this exercise is the creation of a string array with the following names: Tom, Idris, Thibault, and Rashid. Then you will have to display these values from this array in the following order: Rashid, Idris, Thibault, and Tom. It is quite simple. You have to play with the indexes and use the break method to assign values to the array with the least number of lines of code, the fastest and the easiest way. Pause the video and I will see you right after for the correction. It is time to correct the exercise. I hope you succeeded. If not, follow the correction carefully. To begin with, it was necessary to create a string array. To do this, type string, then add square brackets. Then name it order, for example. Then add an equal sign, type new, and put back the string type and type the number of values that the array will contain, which here is 4 in square brackets. To continue, I told you to choose the easiest and fastest way to assign your values to the array, so choose and put braces right after the square brackets. So I added braces and entered the names given below. I put Tom in quotation marks, then a comma. I put Idris, then comma, Thibault, and to finish a comma, then Rashid in quotation marks. And do not forget the semicolon after the braces. Now that we have created our array, we will display the values in the order that I had given you above, which was Rashid, Idris, Thibault, and Tom. So here you just had to type console.writeLine and type the name of the array in brackets, then bracket, and in these brackets, it was necessary to put the index that corresponds to Rashid, thus 3. Then add a plus sign and quotation marks, then a space. It is just a matter of displaying so that the first names are not stuck together when we are going to launch the program. Then we will add a plus sign and repeat as for the first name Rashid, order in brackets, the index of Idris, which here is 1, then add a plus sign, quotation marks, a space, then a plus sign. Same for Thibault, add the index 2 in brackets, then a plus sign, quotation marks, a space, and a plus sign. Finally, we will do the same for Tom. Add the name of the array thus order, add the index 0 in brackets. If I run the program now, our array will be displayed. To sum up, we have created an array with 4 items, then we have used the console.writeLine function to display the values of these arrays. To retrieve these values, we named the array, and in square brackets we indicated the index corresponding to the value we wanted to retrieve. If you have chosen the console.writeLine function several times, it is also correct, as long as you have the expected result. On the other hand, there is a small problem. Let's imagine that our program has 1000 names. So we'll have to write 1000 times the instructions we wrote in the console.writeLine function. As a developer, this is impossible. Then how could we write only one line of code and display these 1000 names? Well, we will use what we call loops. It's a concept that we'll talk about in another video, but basically, it will allow us to repeat one or more instructions several times without having to write hundreds of lines of code. That's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed this video and everything was clear for you. Hello everyone and welcome to this new video. In this video, we will start with a short introduction about strings. Throughout this course, we will have a more detailed section on strings. First of all, what is a string? A string is a sequence of characters, and in C#, as you can see in this example, a string is surrounded by quotes. So, same as declaring a variable, we will have to fill in the string type. Then we will have to name it, first name for example, and assign it a value, medi for example. I'm going to create a second string variable that I'll call name, and I'll assign it or relay it as a string. Finally, I'm going to create a third string variable named names that will contain the two first name and last name variables. You can also concatenate strings by using the plus operator. So in this example, I'm adding the first name as an empty string to create a space. And finally, the last name. This method of concatenating strings might create strange things when you compile the program. You can have different variables that you concatenate, and it is difficult to visualize the output we will get. If this is the case, you can use the format method. In C#, this method belongs to the .NET Framework string class. You probably know that classes can have attributes and methods, and that we can declare these members as static, which means that we can access them directly to the class without creating an object. So in the example you can see here, this formatting method of the string class is what we call a static method. So we can access it directly by using the string.format. This method passes a few parameters. Indeed, the first one is a string format that we use to build our string, which means we will place braces at specific places with a number that will allow us to retrieve the variables that we will put after this comma. The brace with 0 corresponds to the first variable and the 1 to the second one. It's the same principle as the indexes we have in the notion of array. The 0 corresponds to the first variable. So, as you can see in this example, it's much easier to visualize the output than to concatenate several strings together. You might have an object array and you can create a string by combining all the elements of the array by using a separator. So in this example, we have an integer array with the values 1, 2, and 3. And in the second line, we call the join method of the string class, which is a static method and passes two arguments as parameters. The first argument is a separator. In this case, I would like to combine the three numbers by using a comma. The second argument of this method is the array from which we would like to combine these elements. In short, here I have an int array and I will create a string variable that will contain a string from the values of the array thanks to the join method, and each value will be separated by a separator that we will put in the join method. Here we have put the comma, but you can also put a dot, a dash, etc. Now let's take our first name. As you probably know, it is possible to access each of its individual characters by using an index. For example, we will create a char type variable. Indeed, chars contain a single character and we will assign it the first letter of the string. We will retrieve the variable and the number 0 in brackets will correspond to the first letter of the string. For example, it will match the second one, etc. One thing you need to know about strings in C# is that strings are immutable, which means that once you create them, you can't change them. So back to our example here, we can read the value of the first character in our string, but we can't change it. So if we try to do that, it won't work and it won't compile. There are methods in the string class that allow us to manipulate strings and change their values, but all these methods return a new string so that the original string is not changed, and that's why we say immutable. We'll see now that there are some special characters in C# that sometimes have different meanings. For example, if you want to add a new line in your string, you need to use a backslash followed by the letter n. And then when the compiler recognizes it, it will consider that it will make a line break. On the other hand, if you don't add this backslash, the compiler will just see a letter n. Similarly, if you want to make a tab in your string, you need to use a backslash followed by the letter t. This brings us to an interesting situation. For example, if you want to use a backslash in your string to quote it in a website or something, because when the compiler sees it as if we are using a special character, it is not the result we expect and it could be a problem. So if we want to indicate to the compiler that it sees this backslash as being a simple character, we have to prefix this backslash with a second backslash. And this is what we call escape characters in C#. The list of special characters is actually even longer. You can look at the Microsoft documentation, but the ones you can see in this area are the ones you will commonly use in your life as a C# developer. However, there is a small problem. For example, look at this path variable here. We have to indicate to the compiler every time that it's a backslash by putting a second one in front of the main one. This is not very clean, and errors can happen very quickly. In C# there is a thing that allows us to rectify this. And this thing is an add. Thanks to the verbatim identifier, we don't need to use all those double backslashes. We can simply prefix our string with the add sign. We can use only one backslash. Now we are done with strings. Let's go to Visual. We are now on Visual Studio to put into practice what we have just seen together. To begin with, we have seen that the creation of a string is very simple. We have to create a string variable that will name word, for example. And to assign a string, we'll put the sentence we want in quotes, like hello, for example. Then I'll create a second string variable that I'll call first name, and I'll assign it the value Mehdi, for example. So here we have two strings that are stored in string variables. And now, if we want to create a variable that will store both strings to obtain the sentence hello Mehdi, we will create a third string variable that we will name sentence, for example, and we will assign our two variables. To do this, add an equal sign, retrieve the word variable, then we will add a plus sign. The plus sign here will allow us to concatenate our variables. I will pass our two strings together. Here, I will put quotes with a space, otherwise hello and Mehdi will be pasted without any space between. The program will not add a space automatically, so we need to be prepared and add a space. Then I will put a plus sign in order to concatenate the name variable. So now, we have a variable that contains our sentence, and to display it, we need to type console.writeLine and put the sentence variable in brackets. Click on the top to launch the program and you can see that it worked well. Now, as I said in the previous video, this display method is not the best because errors might appear in the output window. And in C#, we've seen that there is a method that allows us to avoid displaying errors in the output window and to visualize what the program will display before launching the program. So we can remove all that. And this method is format, which belongs to the string class. To do this, type string.format. Remember that this method passes two parameters. The first one is a format string that will allow us to build our string, and the second one is the variable whose value we want to retrieve in order to add them in our string format. So here we are going to put quotes, then we're going to put a number in braces. This number will correspond to the variable we're going to put after the comma. Here we'll put 0. It's the same principle as the index of an array. The 0 will correspond to the first variable after the comma, the 1 to the second one, and so on. Now we'll add a comma after the quotation marks and recover the word variable. And if we want to display the content of the sentence variable, we need to add the sentence variable in the console.writeLine parentheses. We can now start running the program, and you can see that good morning is displayed. On the other hand, the sentence that we wanted to display was hello Mehdi. So we just need to add braces with the number 1 and add a variable just after it. If we run the program, we can see that hello Mehdi is displayed. Moreover, we can also add text between our quotes. After the brace, I can put a comma and write my name to obtain the following sentence. Hello, my name is Mehdi. And if I run the program, the sentence, hello, my name is Mehdi is displayed correctly. Finally, in the previous video, we've seen that there are special characters when we use strings. There is the \n to return to the line, the \t to add a tab, double \/ to introduce, and \in to add a string. For example, for a file path, etc. The list is longer, but we are not going to detail all of them. Indeed, it is always the same process. To continue, we'll delete everything and create a string by typing string that will call string and assign any sentence. For example, hello, my name is Toto and I am 20 years old. Then I will type console.writeLine and put the string variables in brackets. If we launch the program, we can see that it is displayed on the same line. Now I would like to display this sentence on two different lines, starting from and I am 20 years old. So you just need to put a \n before the word end. You can see that there is the yellow color for this special character. The IDE has recognized that it was if. Now we launch the program. You can see that our sentence is displayed on two lines. Now we'll create a string variable that will contain a file path, for example, c:\computer/desktop/project/. Well, we'll not get the expected result because when we run the program, the compiler will consider these backslashes as special characters, and we will not be able to do what we want. If I run the program, you can see that the program displays something unusual. So to rectify this, we need to put a second backslash before the backslash to indicate that here we would like to display a backslash in the output window. And if you run the program, you can see that you will get the expected result. However, you can see that as you go along, this is not the proper way. Indeed, it's difficult to read and understand what is displayed. In the previous video, we have seen a way to fix this. Add a net sign before the quotes. And we can now remove every single duplicate backslash. And you can now see that it's much easier to read and understand the program. So whenever you would like to use a backslash, add a new line or a tab, prefix your string with a net sign to have the right form. Hello everyone and welcome to this new video. In this video, we will deal with the notion of condition in C#. With the conditions, we will get into the heart of what's in the programming, the algorithm. Behind the algorithm term, there is actually the logical term. Most of the scripts we've been coding together were not intelligent enough so far. Indeed, when you ask it to display a sentence, it will display without asking any questions. By the end of this section, you will be able to create programs that will react differently depending on the circumstances. For example, let's imagine we've created an e-commerce website and a user would like to connect to their account. In this case, we will use the conditions. The user will enter the login and password. If the password matches the one in the database, then the user can be connected. Otherwise, they will be shown the wrong password. Do you see? So watch out. With these conditions, we will be able to write advanced scripts. Now let's get to the heart of the matter. What is the purpose of the conditions here? It is to test a condition in order to perform an action or not, depending on the test result. For example, let's imagine that a young man is going to the cinema and he needs to be at least 18 years old to be able to access the cinema. So here we need to find our condition and our action. The condition is that this young man must be at least 18 years old, and the action is that we give him access to the cinema. You may notice that a condition indicates either yes or no, or true or false specifically. Indeed, when a condition is evaluated, it will return what is called a Boolean. What is a Boolean? We saw it in a previous video, but I'll remind you, it's either true or false. So it's thanks to this that we can decide whether or not our script should perform an action, depending on the result that a condition will return. Like the example with the young man and the cinema that we will translate into a line of code in order to understand better that we have here an age that must be greater than or equal to 18. Brief aside, we can find our operators of comparison that we had in a previous video. Indeed, we will often use them for conditions or loops that we will see later on. In the next video, we will see how to use one or more conditions to execute an action depending on the result that is returned to us. Hello everyone and welcome to this new video. In this video we will deal with the notion of condition in C#. With the conditions, we will get into the heart of what's in the programming, the algorithm. Behind the algorithm term, there is actually the logical term. Most of the scripts we've been coding together were not intelligent enough so far. Indeed, when you ask it to display a sentence, it will display it without asking any questions. By the end of this section, you will be able to create programs that will react differently depending on the circumstances. For example, let's imagine we've created an e-commerce website and a user would like to connect to their account. In this case, we will use the conditions. The user will enter their login and password. If the password matches the one in the database, then the user can be connected. Otherwise, they will be shown the wrong password. Do you see? So watch out. With these conditions, we will be able to write advanced scripts. Now let's get to the heart of the matter. What is the purpose of the conditions here? It is to test a condition in order to perform an action or not, depending on the test result. For example, let's imagine that a young man is going to the cinema and he needs to be at least 18 years old to be able to access the cinema. So here we need to find our condition and our action. The condition is that this young man must be at least 18 years old, and the action is that we give him access to the cinema. You may notice that a condition indicates either yes or no, or true or false specifically. Indeed, when a condition is evaluated, it will return what is called a boolean. What is a boolean? We saw it in a previous video, but I'll remind you, it's either true or false. So it's thanks to this that we can decide whether or not our script should perform an action depending on the result that a condition will return. Like the example with the young man and the cinema that we will translate into a line of code in order to understand better that we have here an age that must be greater than or equal to 18. Brief aside, we can find our operatives of comparison that we had in a previous video. Indeed, we will often use them for conditions or loops that we will see later on. In the next video, we will see how to use one or more conditions to execute an action depending on the result that is returned to us. We are now on Visual Studio to put into practice the notion of condition in C#. As the example seen in the previous video, a young man who is going to the cinema alone must be at least 18 years old to access it. First, we need a variable that will store this young man's age. So we will declare an int type variable that we will name age, and we'll assign the value 19. Then we need to create an age condition that will allow us to check if the person's age is greater than or equal to 18. Basically, he is of age. To do this in C#, type if. Then put brackets and enter your condition. The condition is that the age is greater than or equal to 18. Open brackets to put our instructions. Here, we will send back to the user that if he is of age, then you can enter. So we will type console.writeLine and write, you are of age, you can enter the cinema. To sum up, we've created a condition from the if in which we've placed a condition. And inside this conditional block, we will place an instruction. We can start running the program. And you will see that the program will display, you are of age, you can enter the cinema. Because the value contained in the age variable is greater than or equal to 18. What will happen now if we change the value of the age variable by putting 12 instead? I will launch the program. As you can see, nothing is displayed. Well, actually here we are testing if our age is greater than or equal to 18. And if the test result is correct, then we can execute the instruction added in the braces. You might want our program to be complete to deal with any situation, whether you are a minor or an adult. No worries, I'm going to this point. In C# and in all programming languages, there is what is called the else. This else complements the if and it will handle all the cases that the if doesn't handle. When the compiler will execute your program, it will first test if the condition is true or false. If the condition is true, then the else is ignored. On the other hand, if the condition is false, then the else will interfere to treat all the other cases. Here in this situation, the role of the else will be treating the case where the young man is a minor. The else doesn't need a condition because it will handle all the other cases that the if can't handle. So in braces of the else, we will add console.runLine that will display you are a minor, you must be accompanied by an adult. Now if we run the program, the age equals 12. We first need to test if the age is greater than or equal to 18. In this case, it's false. So we will choose the else and execute the instruction that it is in braces to display you are a minor, you must be accompanied by an adult. Now that we have seen the if and the else, we also have the possibility to add another condition by doing an else if. Basically, we have specified the condition in the if. For example, the age is equal to 18, but we would like to add a condition for another specific case. When the person is 65 years old, for example, we would like to display you are 65 years old, you are getting a discount. You probably know that the else includes all of the other cases that are not part of the if. So if we put this instruction in the else, if we are 12 years old, for example, we will have this instruction that will be executed, and it's not what we want. We will first change the condition of the if and put age equal 18. Remember that the double equals allows to make an equality if the age is equal to 18 years old. Unlike the simple equal sign, which allows you to assign a value. Then in the console.runLine, we will put discount minus 20%. For example, for the one who is 18 years old. Then it's the same process for the if, but this time we will add an else before it, which makes else if the condition in the brackets will be age equal to 65 years. We open the braces and we will display discount minus 50%. That means that the one who will be 65 years old will benefit from a discount. And to finish, the else will treat all the other ages. We will display a discount of minus 10%. So now if the age equals 65 and we launch the program, we will have to enter the condition of the else if and we display discount minus 50%, and if I put 18, we will enter the first. For example, if I put 4, it will be the else that will treat what's left. Brief aside, when there is only one instruction in your conditions, you can remove the braces for readability reasons. But if you have 2 instructions in your block, for example, it won't be possible. It's only possible with only one instruction. Finally, we'll see another way to make conditions in C#. Let's take our program from the cinema again. Let's imagine that there is a discount for several age groups, which will result in a lot of if, else, if, etc. So our program will not be optimized and we won't be able to read it. However, our policy as a developer is to make optimized and clear programs. We need to respect this policy. In order to solve this problem, we have what we call a switch. It will allow us to avoid putting if everywhere. Now to make a switch is very simple. Type switch and put the variable in brackets with which you want to carry out the tests. Here it's the age variable, so put the age variable in brackets, then open braces, and we will now indicate all the possible cases. First of all, what we will have to do is to indicate the general case, which would take all the cases that we are now going to indicate, like the else in quotes. We have to write default column. Then put all the instructions that we need. I am just going to type console.runLine to display the following sentence. You are not getting any discount. This deals with all the cases that will not be specified, and I will end it with a break. In the switch, we will always end the case with a break to indicate to the compiler that we are leaving this case. If you don't put it, it will loop and will not be able to get out of the case. So it is important to put it at the end of each case to get out of the switch. Now let's go to the first case, which will treat all the children under 4 years old. To do this, type a case which means close, then put the conditions, we'll put less than 4. Then colon, and there we'll put our instruction. We're going to display admission is free for children under 4 years old. And don't forget to break it, semicolon. Then, underneath, to redo another clause, add a box, then the condition you want, for example, all those who have an age between 5 and 12. And we'll create several stories to be able to carry out several tests. Now we will change the age variable value, and you will see each time we enter each clause, you will notice that this way of doing things is the best for this kind of case. You can imagine making a lot of if-else-if throughout your program. Your code won't be unstable and will be difficult to find, especially since as time goes by, you may write much longer programs. So you have to be meticulous and get used to it from now on. Anyway, that's it for this video. I hope my explanations were clear. See you next time in a new video. Hello everyone and welcome to this new video. In this video, we will deal with the notion of loop in C#. First of all, before getting into the heart of the matter, we will define what a loop is in programming. In programming, a loop is a statement that repeats until a specified condition is reached. Basically, it will allow you to repeat one or more actions several times until the given condition is reached. For example, to illustrate the notion of loop, let's choose a character with a starting and an ending point. This character has a function that allows them to move forward one step at a time. We'll call this function moveForward. Now, our character needs to take 20 steps to reach the arrival point. So we need to repeat the advance function 20 times to reach the arrival point. Can you imagine the number of lines of code that this will require? We can't afford to do that because if our character has to take 100 steps, we will have to write advance 100 times in our code. This is where loops will play a big role. We're going to tell our character that as long as you haven't reached the condition, then you're going to move forward, and once you've reached that condition, then you can stop. We will increase the number of steps at each turn of the loop to reach our condition. The program will therefore loop each time and repeat the same instructions. And each turn of the ball is called an iteration. So this program will have 20 iterations. On the other hand, we won't have to write dozens of lines, but only a few ones. And once the condition of 20 steps is met, the program will stop. In short, the process is the same as the conditions, except that here we will reiterate several times. Here, we can see if the number of steps is less than or equal to 20. If it is less, then it is true. So enter the loop, then execute the instructions and increment the number of steps by 1. Incrementing means adding 1. Then, let's start again. The number of steps is now 2. Is it still less than 20 or equal to 20? Yes, so we have to start again and so on until we reach 20. At the 20th iteration, the step value is equal to 20, so it will advance to 1. So we will enter the condition. Then the number of steps we are going to increment will therefore be worth 21. The program is going to carry out a test. 21 is lower or equal to 20. It's false. Then the program is finished. We won't enter the loop condition anymore. Here we will imagine ourselves in a game, but it is also valid for a website where we want to get back the list of all the orders carried out by your customer, for example. Here we are going to use a loop to display them. Can you see? Loops are part of the basics of programming and will be constantly present in your life as a developer. It is important that you understand this notion of loop. In any case, you should know that this is very simple. We are going to go to Visual Studio in order to put into practice the notion of loop in C#. See you soon! We are now on Visual Studio to put into practice the notion of loop in C#. Before starting, it is important to know that there are different types of loop in C#. Indeed, there is the while loop, the for loop, and the Foreach loop. These different loops will allow us to do approximately the same thing. So we will start with the while loop. We will see in another video the for and Foreach loop. First of all, we will create an array that will contain a list of names, for example. Thanks to the while loop, we are going to display them one by one. Creating an array is simple. Indicate the type here, names, so it will be a string type. Then add brackets, name this array tab name, for example. Then add an equal sign, add new to create an instance of the array class. We then need to put back the string type in brackets and open braces to define the values of our array. So I will put 4 names in this array. Type Jibril in quotation marks, then add a comma. Jason in quotation marks, add a comma. Thibaut in quotation marks, add a comma, and finally Ismail in quotation marks, and don't forget the semicolon after the brackets. Now we're going to create a variable that will be used as a counter in our loop, but also to browse the array. Remember that each value of an array has an index. The first value has an index of 0, the second has an index of 1, etc. And since the counter evolves at each iteration of the loop, we will be able to retrieve each array value by putting the value of the counter in the index. It may be a bit confusing, but you will understand right away. So it's a counter, so it will be an integer variable. We will name it counter, but you can name it as you want. Generally, developers name it I, but here we're going to name it counter so it will be clear. And we're going to initialize it to 0. To continue, to create a while loop, type while, add parentheses and put the condition inside. Here, our condition is that as long as the counter is less than the number of values in the array, then you will show us each value, and once you've reached this condition, the loop will stop. How can you write this in C#? Type counter, then less than sign, then tab, which is the name of the array we want to get the value from, and put dot length. Why adding dot length? Here we are doing an operation between a number and an array. This is not possible to compare it this way. Indeed, we have to compare a number with a number. Here the dot will allow us to call a function on our array, and put the length function will allow us to retrieve the number of values in our array. So now we will compare a number with a number. If I translate this condition, it's like we are saying that as long as 0 is less than 4, since the counter is equal to 0 and the number of values in the array is equal to 4, then we will open the braces and put instructions to display each value of the array. So we need to type console.writeLine and put our array in brackets. However, it will not work because here we want to display what our array is worth, whereas we want to display each value of our array. Do you remember what we have to do to display an array value? You have to use square brackets and put the index of a value inside them. Here we want to display each array value at each iteration of the loop. For example, we can't put the index of the value 1 of the array, so 0. This index doesn't change with the loop, so it will display Jibril whenever it will be blocked on a single value. So how could we manage to increase the index in the brackets and display each array value? Well, we can simply put the counter variable in the square brackets. At the beginning of the program, the counter is equal to 0, and as the loop goes on, it will be increased by 1 to reach the condition put in the brackets in the while loop. So the index in the brackets is also increased and will display each value corresponding to its index until the end of the loop. If I run the program now, we can see that all the names of the array are displayed. To conclude, it is important to know that an error can happen very often when programming. Indeed, you might forget the incrementation of your counter inside the loop to reach the condition put in the parentheses of the while loop. This will cause what is called an infinite loop. Basically, if you forget and run your program, here we have a counter that is equal to 0, and the condition is as long as it is less than the number of values in the array, 4, you can execute the instructions. So since we never increment our counter, it will never reach it and the condition will always be considered as true and we will execute the instructions indefinitely. So be careful in the future in order to avoid errors and bugs. That's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed this video and my explanations were clear. See you in the next video to deal with other loops type. We are now on Visual Studio to put into practice the notion of for and Foreach loops. Let's start with the for loop. The difference between the for loop and the while loop is that for the while loop, we will initialize a variable before the loop and increment the variable that allows the loop to run in the braces when we will put everything in the parentheses of the for loop. Here, to create the for loop, I'm going to delete all of this and type for. Then I will create a variable in brackets by giving its type, int. I will then name it counter and initialize it to 0. I will then add a semicolon. Let's now move on to the condition. I will use the same as the while condition as long as the counter is less than the total number of values in the array. Then loop. So counter less than tab underscore last name dot length, then add a semicolon. Then I will go to the increment. I will type counter plus plus. As you can see, the while loop and for loop will differ regarding the writing. You might use the while loop more often in certain cases. To continue, we'll open the braces like we did for the while loop and put our instructions here. Here it was to display the values of our array, so we will type console.writeLine and put in brackets of our array with the index in brackets using the variable counter to browse the array. And if we run the program, we will have the same result as the while loop. This time, with the for loop, we have a clearer and easier code. And we have less risk of falling into an infinite loop since we have to increment the counter in the parentheses. Now let's move on to the Foreach loop, which is a bit different. It will not work with an index system in the same way as the for loop and the while loop. It is written in this way: for each parenthesis, then we will create the same type of things, variable, but we want to return our first names, so we will put a string, then name it a first name, for example, add in which means in what we want to loop, and here it is in the array. So just fill in our array tab, underscore first name. We will open the braces and add the console.writeLine function, except that here in the parentheses, we will not put our array, but the first name variable. Basically, the loop will loop on each element of the array, and at every turn of the loop, the first name variable will be affected by the element of the loop. Basically, at turn 1, the first name will take the first value of the array. In turn 2, it will take the second value, etc. So given that the variable first name is equivalent to our value of the array in every turn, then it is what we will put in the parentheses. And if we launch the program, we can see that we have all our names that are displayed. That's it for this video. All these concepts of loops are easy to understand. If you didn't understand some points, do not hesitate to rewatch the videos about loops. And in the next video, I will give you an exercise to do in order to strengthen and master this notion of loops perfectly. I hope you enjoyed this video and my explanations were clear. See Hello everyone and welcome to this new video. In this video, I'm going to give you an exercise with everything we've seen so far. Indeed, all your knowledge will be required in order to succeed in this exercise. The exercise will be as follows. You will have to create a program that will calculate the factorial of a number entered by a user. If, for example, I enter 5, the program will display 120. And if you don't know what a factorial is the way to write the product of all positive integers less than or equal to an n number. For example, for the number 5, this will be 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5. So you need to create a program that will ask the user for a number, and then the program will calculate the factorial of the number entered by the user and will display it afterwards. On the other hand, there is a condition if we want a larger factorial. We will have to use a long tab because we go out of the int range, and here I want you to work on the conditions too. So if the user enters a number less than or equal to 31, then the factorial is displayed otherwise. The number is too big, we will leave the int. In short, you need to ask a number to the user. Be careful here, there will be a small particularity to you to guess. Then you will create a program which will get this number and will calculate the factorial. And finally, if the user enters a number less than or equal to 31, then the factorial will be displayed. Otherwise, the number is too big, so it's up to you. I hope that I've been understandable enough and that you will succeed. I have no doubt that it is very simple. Don't hesitate to go over the old videos. If there are some notions you don't remember, pause the video and see you right after for the correction. I hope you have succeeded. If not, please pay attention to the correction. The first step was to ask the user to enter a number. Add quotation marks and write, what number do you want the factorial of? And don't forget the semicolon. Now remember that to interact with the user, there is a function that allows us to do so. Indeed, the console.readline function will allow you to retrieve what the user will enter. So here we are going to create a string variable because the console.readline function only returns strings. Then we will name it user_number, for example, and assign it the console.readline function to it. Here, the user_number variable is going to store what the user will enter in order to be able to reuse it just afterwards in our program. On the other hand, you should be careful. Indeed, here we have a string type number, and we can do any operation on a string. So what do we have to do to use this variable? Well, we have to convert our string variable into an int variable. We're going to create an int variable that we'll name conversion. And do you remember the function that allows us to convert a string into an int? It's int.parse. And in the parentheses, we will put our string variable. So now we've converted to int, and we've stored the number that the user has entered in the conversion variable. Now let's go to the heart of the program. As I previously said, we were going to calculate a factorial. I have already said that a factorial is the way to write the product of all the positive integers less than or equal to an n number. The numbers must be included between the number 1 and the number that we have entered. Then we have given the same example that for 5 will give 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5. As you can see, these multiplications are repeated several times. What do you think of when we say several times? 2 loops, exactly. So here we are going to create a for loop that will allow us to make the product of all the integers in order to obtain the factorial, as in the example of 5 above. First of all, we will create a factorial variable which will be initialized to 1, because the factorial must be between 1 and a given number. And logically, if we make the product with a 0, the result will be constantly 0. So now we will type 4, and in parentheses, we will create an I variable initialized to 1. It will allow us to make the product at each turn of the loop, so we need to initialize it to 1. To continue, you need to give the condition, which here is as long as I is less than or equal to the number given by the user, we can execute the statement. Here, as we initialize the I to 1, we will lose a turn because usually we initialize it to 0. And the product also includes the number that the user enters, so the condition must include when the loop reaches this number and must execute the instructions. Then we need to put an equal sign in addition to the lower. We will finish by incrementing the I at each turn of the loop, so here I++. And in the for braces, we will put the following operation. We will write factorial is equal to factorial, an asterisk, I and semicolon. I will explain. Here, we will store the factorial of 2 numbers to get the same thing as the example with the number 5, because the I increases at every turn. To reach the condition, as long as I is less than or equal to the number given by the user, if the user enters 5 at the first turn, it will be factorial, asterisk I. So 1 times 1. And we will store it in factorial. Then for the second turn, I is incremented, so the product will change. So 1 times 2, so we'll store 2 in factorial. At turn 3, it will be 2 times 3, because the factorial is worth 2, and I is worth 3, so we will store 6. and so on, until the condition put in the for is fulfilled. And we will have at the end of this loop the factorial of the number entered by the user stored in the factorial variable. Now let's go to the display. I had imposed the condition it was to display the factorial only if the number entered by the user was lower or equal to 31. Indeed, I could have used another type to manage the extra, but I wanted to make you work as many notions as possible in this exercise. That's why I limited it to 31 to be able to stay in the int range. So what did you have to do? You had to write if and put the following condition: conversion is less than or equal to 31 in parentheses. And in the braces, you can display the factorial as you want. But I want you to use all the notions. I'm going to write console.writeLine in parentheses. Do you remember that there is a function that allows us to avoid some errors in the display? It is the string.format function. Well, I'm going to use it in console.writeLine. Type string.format in parentheses. The first parameter was a string format. So I'm going to add the factorial and get the number that the user has entered. So I will put braces with a 0 inside, and here braces with a 1 inside to display the factorial, and then the variables user underscore number and factorial after the quotation marks. And to finish, we had the else if the number between is too big, then we display the number is too big, so we'll let the int. So we add an else, and inside we put a console.writeLine with the sentence, the number is too big. We are getting out of the int. If we run the program displays. You want the factorial of the number 5, for example. We will enter it. And it displays the factorial of 5 is 120. If we try for 6, for example, we need to restart the program, type 6, then enter, and it displays us the factorial of 6 is 720. 720 is the factorial of 6. Then our program worked perfectly. Now we will test, for example, for a number greater than 31, I will restart the program and I will type 50. What will happen? Well, we enter the case of the else, it does not fulfill the condition of the if. Then it will display us directly that the number is too big. Last thing before concluding, you can also put directly the for in the if to avoid executing the loop for the cases that the program does not manage. I didn't do it here to avoid confusing you too much. We mixed ifs with for, etc. We are going easy so that you understand as much as possible. But what you have to remember is that as a developer, you have to worry about the operations that you ask to the compiler. Here, we will make it work more, when actually we can go directly to the else. Can you see? And when we make it work more, it will ask for more energy of memory, etc. And our purpose is to create programs as optimized as possible and to ask the computer to do the least operations possible. See you next time in a new video. Hello everyone and welcome to this new video. In this video, we will talk about enumerations in C#. What is an enumeration? An enumeration will allow us to group several constants in order to make the reading of our code easier. Let's imagine now that we want to define values that will correspond to a day of the week. So it will be const int Monday is equal to 1, const int Tuesday is equal to 2, etc. By processing this way, this can become very long and overload our code. The enumeration will allow us to avoid this. To create an enum, it's very simple. Go outside the main method, type enum in the class program and name it. Since we are talking about the days of the week, I will write weekdays and open the braces, put the days of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, etc. until Sunday. And now we have created an enumeration. Every constant defined in the enumerations starts at 0 by default, and the enumeration default type is int. But we can specify the type by typing here int short, etc. Indeed, it's up to you. You can choose the one you want. But here it is not mandatory because it is a default int. Enumerations make our life easier. No need to write const int and initialize our constants every time. Everything is done automatically. On the other hand, if you want us to start with 1 instead of 0, you can type equal sign 1 on the first constant, and what's left will be incremented by 1 with each new constant. It is also possible to assign the same value to several constants. For example, if our program returns errors, we can classify certain errors at an equal severity level. For example, we have several errors that are different but have the same severity level, so we will assign them the same value. So go to the main method now and add the weekdays variable. Then we will name day, for example, and tuple the constant of the enumeration, fill in its type, weekdays, dot, and the constant you want to retrieve. For the day Monday, for example, type console.writeLine and put the day variable in parentheses. If you run the program, Monday will be displayed, and if you want to retrieve the Monday value, a new notion before the day variable in the console.writeLine. Put an int in parentheses, and if we replace Monday by Saturday, for example, we'll have the value 6. Here is a way to get the enumeration constant value. In this video, I mentioned all the main points about enumerations. In the next courses, we will go into more detail with advanced notions. In the next video, I'll give you a very simple exercise to practice the notion of enumeration. Let's go, see you soon. We are now going to put into practice the notion of enumeration with a quick and very simple exercise. In this exercise, the program will have to show us it's the weekend, it's this day, if it's Saturday or Sunday, and if not, the program will have to show us it's the week, it's Monday or Tuesday, Wednesday, etc. Everything will depend on the day that you are going to put in the day variable. However, if we change it, the program will have to adapt automatically. And for this exercise, you absolutely need to use the enumeration above, and regarding the display, I will let you look for it. It's very simple. This exercise is very simple. Do not see complications. Pause the video and I will see you right after for the correction. It is time for the correction. I hope you have succeeded. If you haven't, please pay attention to the correction. First of all, we had to think about how your program should work if we are on weekdays or weekends. It was very simple. Here we initialized our first enumeration constant to 1, so that the days of the week don't start at 0, but at 1. Okay, now we know that Friday is the last day of the week, and here it equals to 5, so everything above 5 will correspond to the weekend. We know that when a constant value is strictly greater than 5, then it will be the weekend. What should we do? It's an if, so we put the day variable in parentheses, which stores the enumeration constant, strictly greater than 5. On the other hand, if we decide to proceed this way, will it work? In the previous video, to get the enumeration constant value, we've seen that you had to add parentheses with the int type before the variable to force the conversion into an int, and here it's what we're going to do to perform our condition. Then we had to display it's the weekend, and we had to put either Saturday or Sunday, depending on what we are going to put in the day variable. So we had to type console.writeLine, and inside you can choose the display you want, either with the string.format function or with the quotation marks directly. I'm going to use the format function for the weekend, and for the week I will use the basic display. It will allow you to review all the concepts. So in the console.writeLine, I will put the format method belonging to the string class. So type string.format, add parentheses and quotation marks, then type it's the weekend, it's, and here I will put 0 in braces to recover the day variable that I will add after putting the comma, so the program can fit no matter the day we will choose. And after the comma, I will add the day variable. Then you have to display for the days of the week if the if treats all the cases which are greater than 5. Then to have the days of the week, it is necessary the reverse, or we have to do the else, which is going to treat all the other cases less than or equal to 5, because the weekdays values are included between 1 and 5. Finally, you have to display this is the week. So here we need to type console.writeLine, and inside we will use the classic display, so add quotation marks and write it's the week, it is, and outside the quotation marks add the plus sign to concatenate with the day variable. Here with the day variable, we will retrieve the name of the constant that we store in day. Now if we run the program, we will have it's the weekend, it's Saturday. Here Saturday is 6. It's greater than 5, which corresponds to the weekend. So the condition is true. We can execute the console.writeLine, and here we can get the name of the constant. If we put Sunday and I run it again, we will have the same result, except that Sunday is displayed instead of Saturday. And if I test now with the day of the week, Wednesday for example, and launch the program, we enter while in the else, since the value constant which corresponds to Wednesday is 3. Here, we will test if the if is not strictly greater than 5, so we will enter the else, which treats all the other cases, and execute the instruction in order to display. It's the week, it's Wednesday. As you can see, I used 2 different ways to display it. Both work. However, I will recommend the first method to avoid errors in the display. Indeed, it's easier to visualize the output with the format function, while here we concatenate but we are not sure to get the expected result. That's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and my explanations were clear. See you next time in a new video.